Today's reading is from Mark chapter 10. Jesus heals blind Bartimaeus. They came to Jericho, and as Jesus was leaving with his disciples and a large crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, take pity on me." Many of the people scolded him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted even more loudly, "Son of David, take pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Get up, he is calling you." He threw off his cloak, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. "Teacher," the blind man answered, "I want to see again." "Go," Jesus told him, "your faith has made you well." At once he was able to see and follow Jesus on the road. Amen.
Dear Father, how often in life we cry out for help. As children awake in the night, feeling alone and looking for the comfort of a parent's voice or the touch of a mother's hand. Growing up again, there would be that cry for help when we were hurt, or even just that cry when some problem at school was too much for us. That cry never quite leaves us, and we can become even more demanding as we get older and our faculties or strength fail. So we can understand the cry of blind Bartimaeus. His world was a world of darkness, so he sits alone and he begs. Hear us as we cry out in prayer for those who need help. We cry for those whose sight is gone or is going. We cry out for those who may have difficulty in hearing, a difficulty that increases with age. We cry out for those ill in a hospital bed or at home being cared for by loved ones. We cry out for all who are in pain, whether of body or of the mind. We also cry out for this world of ours, endangered by the carelessness, callousness and selfishness of those whose concern is not for the world, but instead profit for their own pockets. And we cry out for those affected by their action or inaction. Those who, like Bartimaeus, are forced to beg for their next meal or even a bed on which to rest. We cry out, Father, for those in our own community who are disadvantaged for whatever reason. We have not walked in their shoes, so we have no right to judge. This is a hurting world, Father. Help us where we can to help, to heal, and to bring, even for a few moments, compassion. Hear these our prayers. Amen.
Blind Bartimaeus, begging by the roadside, absolutely, totally at the mercy of passers-by for sustenance. It's a tragic, heart-wrenching, demoralising and embarrassing situation for anyone to be begging at the side of the road, hoping some will notice and offer to help. But have you or someone you know ever been in a similar situation? I don't mean physically crouched on a pavement begging, but in what to you seems a crisis time when you just want a human touch, an inner realisation that somebody notices, that somebody cares. Many of us have witnessed such scenarios, although not necessarily on the streets. Walk through the ward of a nursing home and you'll see in the faces of the lonely their hands reaching out. They aren't reaching for money or for food. They just want a human touch, to know that somebody notices, that somebody cares. Maybe you've never sat by the side of the road and cried, "Oh Jesus, Son of David, have mercy upon me." But I bet you have if you've sat in a hospital casualty room or outside an operating theatre while doctors and nurses fought to save a loved one. Or if you've stood beside an open grave and bade a dearly loved one goodbye. And yes, you've been there if you've lain awake at night, wondering how you would feed your family or keep your marriage together or help your child weather a difficult time. The truth is that most of us at some point in our lives will feel like blind Bartimaeus, sitting at the side of the road, praying that some will notice us and care. And the greatest of good news is that Jesus does notice us and does care, just as he noticed Bartimaeus on that day. Christ and his disciples, along with a large group of followers, are heading out of Jericho. The route passes by where Bartimaeus regularly sat begging. And as Jesus came closer to him, Bartimaeus cries out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And it seems to have been the norm with the disciples. They try to quieten Bartimaeus so he doesn't embarrass them. But alas, thankfully they are unsuccessful. Because Jesus, hearing him cry out even louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me," is moved by his simple plea. So Christ calls Bartimaeus to him. The blind Bartimaeus, hearing Jesus was calling him, jumps to his feet, throws off his blanket, which would be a tatty, moth-eaten, loose piece of cloth that beggars wore to protect them from the inclement weather. And because he didn't want anything to hinder him from coming into the Master's presence, he got rid of it before he reached Jesus. I wish you and I could cast off our prejudices and scruples and become just as eager to come to Jesus. This Bible story reflects the unfortunate social situation that centuries and centuries of human progress has never managed to rectify. But it is also a simple way of stating a profound truth. Some of us would have to throw off so many outer layers, such as our sophistication, our cynicism, our secular preoccupation with material security, that it would be difficult, nay, virtually impossible, for us to run gladly to Jesus as Bartimaeus did. Our realization has to be, when Jesus saw Bartimaeus in need, he cared. Friends, God cares about every one of us who from time to time end up sitting at the side of the road. You may know and feel that important truth in your heart, but have you ever totally accepted it in your mind? It's easy to have misgivings about God's love for us. After all, this world is huge, so how could we possibly believe that God cares about each individual person in this earth? But thankfully, we don't always judge value based on size. While we were still children, we learned that a £1 coin has more value than a 50p piece, even though that 50p is larger. We can dig a 2-ton rock out of the ground and it will never be as valuable as a 2-carat 400 milligram diamond, and put that diamond on the third finger of a lady's left hand and the value increases infinitely. If we don't judge value on the basis of size, why should God? We may be a very tiny part of God's creation, but we are far from insignificant. Every bit of evidence from both theology and science supports the proposition that this world was created on our behalf, and we are the most prized creatures on it. But there are so many of us for God to love. Well over 5 billion people on earth right now. So suppose we went to Beijing or Delhi, two of the most populated cities in the world, where there are thousands and thousands of people in the streets. What's our first impression likely to be? Probably we just see a great mass of faces that all look alike. But stay a while. Stay a while in one of those great cities, meet and get to know the people and understand their culture. And they would no longer all look the same to us. We would see them as individuals. Individuals that God knows every single person in the world by name. He knows every Israeli and Palestinian by name. He knows every child in Zambia and South Africa by name. He knows all of us by name. God does not see us just as a sea of humanity. He sees us and loves us as individuals. Christ cared for Bartimaeus by asking what he could do for the blind beggar. Bartimaeus responded so eagerly, casting off his garment, asking Jesus, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus answers, "Your faith has made you well." Our faith too can heal those of us sitting by the side of the road. Maybe we need to realise that we don't need to cast off anything to come to Jesus, but to accept and to believe that God of this vast universe cares about your needs and my needs and our neighbours' needs, and God will see through whatever crisis that confront us. When Jesus wanted to illustrate the love of the Father, he pointed to a tiny sparrow and asked, "Are you not of more value than they?" We are of infinite value to God. He cares so much for us as individuals. All that we need to do is to open our hearts and let his love dwell within. Amen. And thank you for joining Ian and I today.